Warframe is a consistently interesting game that deserves a little more attention. Hey folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 10 Warframe facts you probably didn't know. Number 10, Warframe is obviously a very modern game, but it may have existed as early as the year 2000. You see, a game by the name of Dark Sector was announced at that time by Digital Extremes with the stated goal of merging the intense action elements of Unreal Tournament with the scope and character evolution of a persistent online universe. Sounds a little familiar. Remember, Destiny did not exist in the year 2000. Digital Extremes did eventually release Dark Sector, but the game really wasn't much like what they announced in the year 2000. The publisher actually was very clear to them not to do sci-fi games. But Digital Extremes kept the idea on the back burner. And wouldn't you know it, when they developed and released them under the name of Warframe, it was a serious success.
Yeah, I mean, we have 26 million registered users, which is crazy.
Number 9, if you're ever cruising around and notice that there are Taylor Swift lyrics in the description of Kadesh on Mars, these are remnants of kind of experiments that Digital Extremes did where they kind of opened up some EVE Online-ish interplanetary conflict ideas that sort of left the ability to simplify a bit, be in charge of mapping certain locations, making connections, and then taxing people who use them. One of the main things was being allowed to do the flavor text for the area. Now, this is not in the game anymore, however, some of that flavor text still is, and Kadesh is one of the places that still has it. In fact, Kadesh's use of the Taylor Swift Shake It Off lyrics as its description ended up being the very last of the player-authored flavor text for locations. Number 8, the Warframe developers Digital Extremes don't have the best security, or at least didn't a couple years ago. A guy, just any old guy, specifically a Reddit user by the name of Undercover Legend, basically pulled a solid snake on the place, snuck in, procured lunch on site, and by that I mean he stole food from them, and then found out about a card game they were developing called Keystone. Now later, Keystone ended up being a hero shooter a la Overwatch, although with a more retro sci-fi vibe, which was then renamed to Amazing Eternals, which was then cancelled, but that's fairly interesting. Apparently the food was very good too. Also apparently they just had like PS4s and Xbox Ones sitting around, completely unattended, that anybody could have just walked in and stolen at any time and nobody would have known the difference. Also, people had no idea that this guy wasn't a person who worked there, and at 6 p.m. everybody started leaving, so he just, quote, followed them out, and one guy said, "See you tomorrow," end quote, so he agreed. Number 7, they've talked about Warframe 2, but not in the context you might expect. They view it as kind of a marketing thing more than anything else. They joke about various different things they're doing, whether it be separate projects or even internal projects in the Warframe universe, as this is our Warframe 2, and Warframe 3, and Warframe 4, and all those things. Quote, there's probably some marketing angle to be tempted to do what you're talking about, but I don't think so, end quote. Basically, assume that Warframe is going to go on forever. They do a good job of keeping it updated, and they obviously care about it, because they basically kept it around for over a decade before releasing it, despite every publisher they brought it to saying it would fail, and it hasn't failed. More on those publishers in a minute. So I would just take them at their word about there not being a sequel. Number 6, if you remember number 10, we talked about how in 2000 the concept for Dark Sector indicated that Warframe kind of existed in the year 2000. That's a long time ago, and if you look at this actual footage of the concept game, it looks so much more like the game we know now as Warframe than the game that was released eventually as Dark Sector. As they were shopping around the ideas seen here, apparently some publishers wanted an eye patch on the character, not understanding that that wasn't really what was going on at all. Let's just say publishers had a very interesting view of this game. Which leads us to number 5, every publisher said it would fail. In 2012, they took the original Dark Sector concept and gave it a different name. It basically had nothing to do with whether or not they thought they were going to make a ton of money, because they'd shopped the idea to publishers, and publishers had just been like, no, this is a joke, it is going to fail. The creative director of Warframe, Steve Sinclair, specifically said, we just got kicked in the asked repeatedly when talking about how many publishers told them this was not something that people would want. And this is after meeting after meeting with various free-to-play big names and a working prototype that demonstrated the game. Nobody wanted it. But Sinclair says they actually hear from those same publishers now saying, can you help us figure out Western free-to-play? And it seems as if they believe that Digital Extremes figured it out by accident and would just like to do the work for them, I guess. If Digital Extremes laughs in those people's faces when they get that question, I can't say I'd be shocked. Number 4, there is a really healthy Warframe fandom that makes a lot of very cool things, like 3D printed pistols that are then painted, surfaced, and put together with some amazing detail that you'd think there would actually be products of this out or something. I mean, the stuff some people do is amazing. Number 3, for whatever reason, the Warframe creators decided to put a Flappy Bird minigame into Warframe. It plays literally exactly like Flappy Bird, and if you have the Zephyr Warframe, you can access it via the Z preset. It's a goofy rendition of the game. You are not a bird. You're just as you would be in any other part of the game. However, you're doing the flapping. And it's designed in exactly the same way as Flappy Bird, randomized, different sized obstacles that you have to flap through. I think it's actually a little bit tougher than the real game, which can get actually pretty tough anyhow. Also, do you remember when that game took everything by storm? It even took Warframe by storm. Number 2, the name Warframe actually came from Boeing research from way back World War II era, in which they were proposing the idea of an exoskeleton and actually called it a Warframe. Now, this is back decades ago when Boeing was in every way a lot like an Aperture Science, except for without the shower curtain thing. But I think that's actually a pretty interesting idea to sort of harvest for names. One of the creators described the Warframe exoskeleton as a suit of armor combined with a katana, and I'm not so sure that that came from Boeing, but at very least the name did. And finally, number 1, Warframe removed a microtransaction because a single player used it way too much. In fact, somebody paid for a single microtransaction 200 times, and Warframe realized they'd created a slot machine. And keep in mind, I just said realized, not intentionally created a slot machine. Essentially, there was a pets feature way back when they first introduced the Kubros, which are the virtual pets in Warframe. You could pay a premium currency into a little, well, let's just say appearance roulette, which would generate a new fur pattern in different colors for the Kubro, and it cost 10 platinum, which is about 67 cents in the real world. They realized very quickly, because of how much people were using it, that it was essentially functioning as a slot machine, which people would essentially put 67 cents in repeatedly and continually change the pet until they were satisfied or until they were bored of doing it. Like I said, somebody did it over 200 times and it made them go, oh. After literally just a couple of days, they took out this feature because although it made them a lot of money, they really just were not comfortable with making money that way, which says a lot about Digital Extremes. I think it paints them in a much more positive light than certain other companies we know about today, doesn't it? Keep in mind, Warframe is a passion project though, and if you've got passion for it, leave us a comment telling us your favorite Warframe moments or things that you've done in the game that you think other people might be interested in. If you like this video, click the like button, and if you're not subscribed now, it'd be a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and the best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. As always, thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time, right here on gameranx.